You ever go camping deep in the woods and feel like something's watching you? Like the trees themselves are holding their breath, waiting for you to mess up? This story isn't just about a camping trip gone wrong. It's about what happens when you ignore that one feeling in your gut, the feeling that something out there doesn't want you to leave. Turn off the lights. Put on your headphones. Because once you hear this story, you'll never go near the woods the same way again. My name is Chris Reynolds, and I'm going to tell you about the most terrifying experience of my life, something that changed how I see the wilderness forever. It happened last October during what was supposed to be a routine camping trip with my younger brother Jake in Black Pine National Forest. We'd been making this annual trip since we were teenagers, always to the same remote spot near Dead Man's Creek, about 3 miles from the nearest trailhead. The first day started normally enough. We arrived around 4 p.m., the autumn sun already low in the sky, casting long shadows through the dense pine trees. I remember joking with Jake as we set up our new 4-person tent, the fancy one we'd splurged on after last year's rainstorm nearly flooded us out. We built a proper fire pit with stones, cooked up some burgers, and cracked open a couple beers as the daylight faded. Around 11 p.m., Jake said he was turning in. I stayed up by the fire, enjoying the quiet and working my way through a book. That's when I first noticed how unusually silent the forest had become. No owls, no rustling leaves, just absolute stillness. I checked my phone, 2:06 a.m. The fire had burned down to glowing embers when I felt that first prickling sensation on the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. When I looked up, my blood turned to ice. About 30 feet away, at the very edge of the fire's dying light, stood a tall, dark figure between two ancient pine trees. It was impossibly still, more like a shadow-given form than anything living. Even as my eyes strained to make sense of it, I could tell its proportions were all wrong. The torso too long, the arms hanging at unnatural angles, and the way its head tilted slightly to one side made my stomach clench with primal fear. I sat frozen for what felt like an eternity, my hands slowly inching toward the hunting knife in my belt. The figure didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there watching me with unseen eyes. When I finally managed to grab my high-powered flashlight and flick it on, the beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but empty forest. No footprints, no disturbed undergrowth, just those same 2 pine trees standing sentinel in the night. The next morning, Jake woke to find me still sitting by the cold fire pit, knife in hand, staring at that spot between the trees. When I told him what happened, he gave me that little brother smirk and said I'd probably just seen a bear standing on its hind legs or something. But when we investigated the area after breakfast, we found something that wiped the smirk right off his face. In the soft earth between those 2 pines were 2 deep impressions, roughly the size and shape of human feet, but at least 16 inches long. And here's what still haunts me: there were no other prints leading to or from that spot. It was as if something had simply materialized there, stood watching our camp all night, then vanished without a trace. We should have packed up right then. We should have hiked straight back to the car and gotten the hell out of those woods. But we didn't, because neither of us wanted to admit how scared we really were. And that was the beginning of the worst 3 nights of our lives. We stayed. I don't know why. Maybe pride, maybe denial, maybe because we didn't want to admit to each other that something wasn't right. So instead of leaving, we brushed it off. We told ourselves we were overthinking. We made eggs, drank coffee, and acted like everything was normal. But it wasn't. That second night, things got worse. We spent the day hiking up a nearby ridge. Jake was quieter than usual, glancing over his shoulder often, especially when the wind picked up. At one point, we passed a fallen tree that had strange scratch marks on it, long, deep gouges that looked almost like claws, but too wide, too clean. Jake noticed it too. "That's not bear," he whispered. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to admit I was scared, but my gut told me something was off. The woods felt wrong, like we were being watched from every direction, like we didn't belong there anymore. We got back to camp just before sunset. Everything looked untouched. Tent, supplies, the firewood we stacked. But as the last light faded, the silence returned. And then the whispers started. They were faint at first, like someone talking from far away. I was kneeling by the fire, feeding in sticks, when I heard them, low voices, hard to understand, like they were speaking underwater. I looked at Jake. He was pale, his eyes wide. "You hear that too?" I asked. He nodded. "It's coming from the trees." We stood up slowly, scanning the woods with our flashlights. Nothing, just trees, dark shadows, and the sound of our breathing. But the whispers kept going, circling us. They didn't sound angry. Not at first. More like curious, testing us. Then all at once they stopped. Silence again. Thick, heavy silence. Like the forest was holding its breath. Then Jake shouted, "Did you see that?" I turned, flashlight swinging wildly through the trees. He was pointing toward the edge of camp. Something just moved, right behind that log. We crept closer, knives drawn. My flashlight flickered for a second. Jake's too. We both froze. Then, crack, a stick snapped behind us. We spun around. No one there. Our flashlights came back on and we ran. Not out of the woods. Just back to camp. Like fools. Back at the fire, we didn't talk. We just sat, backs to the flames, watching the forest from both sides. That's when Jake noticed something new. The tree. He pointed to one of the big pine trees just 20 feet away. On the trunk, something had been carved into the bark. Not initials. Not animal markings. A symbol. A circle with an eye in the center and jagged lines like teeth around it. The bark was still fresh, like it had been carved recently. "What the hell is that?" I asked. Jake didn't answer. That night, neither of us went into the tent. We stayed by the fire until sunrise, blades in hand, backs together. Waiting, listening. Around 3 a.m., the whispers came back. This time they were clearer. They weren't words, but we understood. "You're not welcome here." Then we saw the shadow again. It was the same one, tall, thin, standing where it had the night before. But this time it moved. Not fast. Slowly. Silently. One step forward, then stopped. Then another step. Closer. I raised my flashlight and shouted, "Who's there?" It didn't answer. It just vanished. Like smoke. One moment it was there, the next, it was gone. And then the wind returned. Trees swaying, leaves rustling, and the forest suddenly alive again. Like it had been holding itself still until the figure disappeared. That's when Jake said it. "We need to go." He didn't wait for me to agree. He went into the tent and started packing. But I couldn't move. I was still staring at the place where the figure had been. Because something was left behind. A small item on the ground. I walked over and picked it up. It was a photo. An old one. Torn and water damaged. It showed two boys, about 10 or 12 years old, sitting by a campfire. And behind them, that same symbol carved into a tree. But the faces of the boys were scratched out. And written on the bottom corner of the photo, in red ink. They never left. We didn't waste a second the next morning. Jake and I packed up in silence. The photo still burned in my jacket pocket. We didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about the whispers or the symbol on the tree. We just moved, like every minute we stayed was a minute stolen from something watching us. But when we started heading back down the trail, we realized something terrifying. The forest had changed. The trail we came up on, the one we'd followed for 5 years, was gone. The trees were the same, sure, but the direction felt wrong. The landscape didn't match. And worst of all, our compass spun uselessly in circles. No north, no anything. Jake cursed under his breath and kicked a log. This doesn't make sense. We marked this trail. I didn't answer, because deep down I knew what was happening. We weren't in Black Pine anymore. Not really. It looked like the same forest, but it wasn't. It was twisting, shifting, and we were being led in circles. Worse, what? We hiked all morning. No signs. No trail markers. Not even the creek we always used to find our way. Around noon, we stopped to rest near a giant moss-covered boulder. I pulled out the photo again. It had changed. The boys in the picture? Their faces were completely gone now. Not scratched out, blank. And under the photo, the writing had smeared into something new. Only one walks out. That's when the wind picked up. But it wasn't cold wind. It was hot, like breath, and it smelled like rot. Jake stood and pulled his knife. It's here. I didn't ask what he meant. I knew. Whatever had been watching us, whispering to us, standing at the edge of our firelight, it was coming now. And it wasn't going to let both of us leave. We ran. Not down the trail. Just anywhere. Through brambles and mud and trees that reached out like claws. Our gear bounced on our backs, branches scratched our arms and faces, but we didn't stop. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Behind us. Not running. Walking. Measured. Whatever it wasn't in a hurry. It knew we couldn't outrun it. Suddenly, Jake tripped. Went down hard. I stopped, grabbed his arm, yanked him up. His face was covered in dirt and blood. We can't outrun it, he said, breathing heavy. We have to face it. I looked around. We were in a clearing now. Circular. Surrounded by trees that looked wrong. Too tall. Too thin. Their bark was black, like it had been burned. And on every trunk, the same symbol. That eye with teeth. We were in its place now. And then, it stepped into the clearing. The Watcher. 7 feet tall. No face. Just a long, pale head with holes where a mouth and eyes should have been. Its limbs were too long, bending in strange angles, like it was made of rope and bones. It didn't speak, but it didn't have to. We heard the words in our heads. Only one walks out. It raised one long finger and pointed at Jake. No! I shouted, stepping between them. Take me! Jake grabbed my arm. Don't you dare, man! The Watcher tilted its head. Then it split. Its body opened like cloth, and from inside, hundreds of whispering voices poured out. Like smoke made of screams. They circled us. Memories flashed in my mind. Not mine. Others. Faces I didn't know. People who had been here before. Campers. Hikers. All of them taken. Suddenly, Jake shoved me hard. I hit the ground, dazed. When I looked up, he was walking toward the Watcher. What are you doing? I screamed. He turned, tears in his eyes. It wants one of us. Let it be me. Before I could stop him, the Watcher absorbed him. No blood. No scream. Just gone. Jake's body vanished like smoke into the thing's chest. And then, silence. The Watcher slowly turned and faded into the trees. Gone. I don't remember how I got out. I woke up on the side of Highway 17 2 days later. A ranger found me lying in the grass, dehydrated and mumbling about eyes in the woods. They took me to a hospital, ran tests, said I'd probably gotten lost. Heat stroke. Delirium. But I know what I saw. I know what took my brother. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I still hear the whispers in my room. Only one walks out. Myself what the doctors told me. It was trauma, not reality. They're wrong. Because the thing is, Jake's not really gone. Not completely. It started with the photo. The same old one from the campsite. The one that changed in the forest. I kept it in a locked drawer at home. One night, I couldn't sleep, so I pulled it out again. The faces were still blank. But now there was something new in the corner of the image. A third figure. It wasn't there before. So, shadowy. Standing in the woods just behind us. The next day, my lights started flickering. I blamed the wiring. Then the taps turned on by themselves. I'd find water running. Footprints on the hardwood floor. Wet, like someone walked through the house barefoot. I installed cameras. Motion sensors. They never triggered. But every morning, I'd wake up to one thing. The photo. Placed carefully on my kitchen table. No one had access to it but me. And then the dreams began. I'd find myself back in the clearing. The burned trees. The symbols. Jake standing across from me, whispering something I couldn't hear. But each night he stepped a little closer. Then one night I finally understood the whisper. It let you go, but you weren't supposed to leave alone. I jolted awake. Every door in the house was open, including the front door. That was the last straw. I packed everything and moved. Different city, different state. No more forests, just gray buildings and loud streets. Somewhere safe, somewhere with people. But 2 nights ago, it found me again. I was walking home late from the store. It was raining. I passed a streetlight, and under it stood a tall, faceless figure. Motionless. Soaked. Watching me. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just stared. It tilted its head. Exactly like before. When I finally blinked, it was gone. But that night, I found the photo again, on my new kitchen table. The third figure? Closer now. Clear. It wasn't watching us anymore. It was walking toward me. I'm writing this now as a warning. If you ever go camping and feel like something's watching you, if you hear whispers at night, if your trail disappears, don't wait for it to show itself. Because whatever it is, once it chooses you, it never really lets go. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what's still out there. Unseen, unheard, waiting. Subscribe to the channel for more true-style horror stories. Inspired by real fears, whispered legends, and things that were never meant to be found. Candle, got the chills? That's normal. But tonight, when you lie in bed and hear a branch tapping your window, ask yourself, was it the wind? Or something still watching? Subscribe. And never go camping alone. Ever again.